fight from within. You're about to go behind enemy lines.
Roger, 3-2. Goliath copies all. Go ahead. Target is surrounded by multiple firms entering what appears to be a residential area. Requesting permission to engage.
From the People's Republic of New York City, you're now going behind enemy lines with Gene Berardelli and Russ Gallo.
And you are now behind enemy lines. Hey there, how you doing, America? Gene Berardelli here with my boy Russ Gallo. Russ, how you doing, man?
The state of our show is strong.
Yes, it is. Our hand is strong. Let's just say that right now. Glad to have you back, man. We missed show the past couple of weeks. Happy New Year, by the way.
What's going on? I've been out of the loop for a while. What are we talking about
Well,
tonight?
there's a lot going on. As we know, this is our State of the Union show. And, you know what? I gotta say, I've never been more entertained by a State of the Union than I have by this one, Russ. And by entertained, I mean appalled. Absolutely appalled. Can you believe some... Listen, we titled this show, hashtag SOTU, which typically means State of the Union. But in this case, we think the S stands for something else, Russ, right?
I honestly think this man needs help. I mean... Michael Savage often says that liberalism is a mental disorder, but Barack Obama is exhibiting signs of mental illness, the likes of which have never been seen in politics. I don't know what kind of fantasy land this man is living in, but half of his speech was devoted to how great the country is doing economically, in the energy sector, race relations. Like, I just don't understand what world this man is living in where he sees that any of that stuff could possibly be true.
I don't understand how he sees himself, really. I tweeted out earlier, does this man live in the same America that I live in?
I mean, he's touting the Iran deal. Meanwhile, several hours before the speech, 10 American sailors are being held captive by the Iranians. Not a mention of it in the State of the Union.
He said America will act alone if they have to keep our citizens secure. Except when it comes to Benghazi, places like that. Void where prohibitive, I guess. He says Joe Biden's going to cure cancer. I can't anymore.
Go get it, Joe. I mean...
Joe, get on that.
First of all, speaking of Joe Biden, look, I know you weren't watching it. You were reading along and listening along. I was actually watching this thing.
Well, some of us have to put the show together, Russ,
I mean, yeah, a little late, Gene. But so we're watching. I'm watching this thing.
The State of the Union just ended. What are you talking about? Stop that.
And in the spirit of the new movies that are coming out, though, the bar scene from Star Wars, the original Star Wars. When you look at the audience here at the State of the Union, I mean, I'm going to list off some names, because as they were popping up, I was writing these names down, and I was thinking, put these people in one room.
So I'll do the music in the background.
There you go. So John McCain, Joe Biden, Feinstein, Kerry, Ginsburg, Hoyer, Sanders, Pelosi, Franken, Schultz, and Warren. Wasserman Schultz, that was. She had the dash in her name. But how scary is that group of people? Most of them were Democrats. I had to throw John McCain in there, too, because John McCain looks like he was playing that weird organ in the Star Wars thing. Google the picture, you'll see what I'm talking about.
I'm at the end of the music, Russ. You got more?
There's a whole host more. But it's scary what the United States Congress is being led by, especially on the Democratic side. The hope and change and the youth of America are supposedly liberal. Look who your leaders are. Look who your nominee is going to be. It's either going to be a grandmother who may be indicted, may not be indicted before the election comes around, or Bernie Sanders. I'm assuming he's a grandfather, if not a great-grandfather by now. The man hasn't combed his hair since the late 90s.
I saw a picture of Bernie Sanders on the Twitters, Russ, during the speech, and it looked like he was wondering why all these people were on his lawn.
The Twitters. I don't even... Does this guy even understand what any of this stuff... What, does he know what's going on? It's just so scary. By the way, Gene.
Yes, sir.
Donald Trump is going to be our next president. I hope you're ready for this. I know we debate this and we talk about it. I'm going to mention it every show until you admit it.
You know what? I'm not convinced yet. I'm not convinced that he's the guy. You know, I can see Ted Cruz winning it. I can see Marco Rubio winning it. Although Marco Rubio's comments.
So you can't see the guy who's the front runner for the past 6 months.
Of course I can. I'm just not saying that he's the nominee. Of course I see him running.
There were several backhanded statements that the president made directed directly at Donald Trump.
Which shows you the clout that Donald Trump has over the American people right now and the threat that Obama sees Trump as to his legacy. And that's what this is all about. It's about his legacy. But go ahead, Russ.
Well, legacy, yes. Where I was going with the Donald Trump thing is pretty much everything Donald Trump has said over these past few months has become the spotlight of what's on the news every night. And even the networks their panelists say, we don't understand why the media talks nonstop about Donald Trump. Meanwhile, they're talking nonstop about Donald Trump even on the panels. Basically, everything the man has said has come to pass. If you look at ISIS and immigration, and we've spoken about this for years, Gene, how everything's intermingled.
Absolutely.
You know, if you talk about national defense, you're talking about your border, you're talking about your economy, you're talking about
climate
immigration.
Change. No.
Climate change. I don't know if that's anywhere on there. By the way, you're living in fantasy land again, according to the president.
The science is settled.
Yes, it's settled.
Gosh darn it! Why
so
are you even
question the great one? Don't question the great one.
How dare you?
Or be labeled the denier.
The unmitigated goal. How dare you? By the way, how many straw men did President Obama put into his speech? I mean, for goodness sake, Republican, deniers will say this. People who are demagoguing fear will say this. How many straw men did he put up to try to make him sound like the savior? By the way, hope and change totally in effect for President Obama.
Listen, we have to be happy with what we got. The guy is done. We control both houses of Congress. We got rid of John Boehner. We're doing damn good.
So the state of our union is strong.
It's getting stronger.
Except in states where the states are not strong.
I mean, can you imagine having John Boehner back there? Maybe John Boehner and President Obama could both cry over gun violence together somewhere. They're misplaced tears. Meanwhile, we got guys pledging their allegiance to ISIS and shooting police officers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. But the White House refuses to call it a terrorist attack, saying that they are waiting on the local authorities in Philadelphia. They're waiting on the local authorities in Philadelphia to complete their investigation before they figure out whether it's a terrorist act or not. Aren't you glad to know that the national security of the United States is being handled by the police department of Philadelphia? Fully capable police department, but I don't care for them to be, running our national security.
Well, let's just say this, Russ. When someone says, I shot that person in the name of Islam, we need to confirm if that was really true or not, even though the person admitted to it.
No, we won't even confirm whether it was really true or not. If you listen to this administration and anyone on the left, they just blanketly make the statement that it's not true. The mayor of Philadelphia came on and said it's not true. How do you say something that the killer himself, or the attempted killer himself, said is not true?
Well, you know what?
The killer said, I did this in the name of Islam and I pledge allegiance to ISIS. And the mayor came on and said, this was not done in the name of Islam and has nothing to do with ISIS.
Evidence still to be confirmed. But since we're talking about terrorism, let's get to the portion of President Obama's speech when he talked about terrorist networks. Priority number one is protecting the American people and going after terrorist networks. Both Al-Qaeda and now ISIL pose a direct threat to our people because in today's world, even a handful of terrorists who place no value on human life, including their own, can do a lot of damage. Okay, I think we can all agree with that statement, but let's talk about how he focused on ISIS.
Wait.
This is what
Say the last piece of that again?
Sure. Because even a handful of terrorists who place no value on human life, including their own, can do a lot of damage. Yet, when we have seen recent terror attacks abroad, especially in Paris, and the president talks about his strategy towards, quote-unquote, undermining and now he's saying destroying.
It was degrading.
Degrading. Thank you very much. His actions do not back up his words because he thinks that his strategy of engagement, which is, drone propaganda and not calling them radical Islamists, is working. It's not working. We've seen terrorists become more emboldened in the Obama administration than we had in past years.
Not only is it not working, Gene, and this is something I thought about early on in his speech when he first went off the rails, and he pretty much went off the rails right off the bat. But I want everyone listening to think about this for a minute. Bill Clinton, in the 90s, had a problem with terrorism. He had problems with a lot of things, but he had a problem with terrorism for the sake of this discussion.
Blue dresses and cigars.
So the man had attacks on the USS Cole, the African embassies, the World Trade Center, the first World Trade Center attack, and that was all done by a group called Al-Qaeda. Or I don't know what the president would call it. Al-Qaeda. I don't know what this president calls it now.
Come up with some.
So first of all, I don't understand. This president calls it ISIL still. So right off the bat, he's not serious about destroying them. All right, so let's get back to Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton throughout the 90s had a problem with terrorism, and he did very little. He did almost about the same as this president is doing against ISIS. Pinpricks, strategic strikes here and there, drop a couple of bombs, fly a few sorties. What did it... Hold on, I'm going somewhere here. What did it lead to? What did it lead to in the beginning of the next president's term? He kicked the can down the road so that the next president would have to handle Al-Qaeda, and it led to what, Mr. Gene?
It led to the 9/11 attacks.
Okay, so now this president goes for 7... He's going to go for 8 years of kicking this can down the road of ISIS so that the next president, which I am guessing is going to be Donald Trump, is going to have to handle. And I hope to God that the outcome is not the same and history does not repeat itself. But I'm just not sure about that.
Well, let's just look at the facts. And I know Obama is... He's allergic to facts. And we saw this in the speech. The rose-colored glasses speech, I typify this to be. How many airstrikes were there under the Bush administration in Iraq on a given day?
It was roughly 10,000, if I'm not mistaken. Off the top of my head, I'm guessing.
And yet, Obama is touting the fact that he has had 10,000 airstrikes total against ISIL.
What is ISIL?
Well, the number of sorties have decreased. Our presence in the region is diminished. We are seeing more attacks and more attempts attacks at home than we've seen at any time under any president. We are seeing homegrown Americans becoming radicalized. And we are seeing Americans so petrified by fear of being labeled racist that they choose not to act rather than act when they see something suspicious happening in their midst. Come on!
And if you don't believe that's true, San Bernardino. There was a neighbor who thought there was suspicious activity going on at the house where the terrorists lived. That they seen several Middle Eastern men coming and going at strange hours of the night. And they wanted to say something, but they didn't because they didn't want to be labeled racist.
And now
Come on.
And now we're at a pivotal point in our nation. I know we say this every presidential year, but I think this year it does really apply. I didn't really say that in 2012 because you had a sitting incumbent going. 2016 is a pivotal year because now it's all up for grabs. And when you look at what Republicans have to offer versus what Democrats have to offer, and you look at the mood of our nation, I don't care what the president says, we are not safer than we were 8 years ago. We are in a greater state of domestic emergency than we are at any point during any administration prior to President Obama. We're at a state of almost international irrelevance when it comes to our inaction on terror as compared to what Europe... I can't believe we're talking about Europe leading the attack on terror when we talk about what France did in other places. We're at a state where America has to regain their command, regain our footing here. It's a very scary time on that level.
So what you're saying is the pendulum swung very far in one direction, and we need to swing pretty far back in the other direction to have any sort of sense of equilibrium. Is that what you're saying?
It needs to swing further past the Jeb Bushes and the John Kasichs, and I dare say even the Chris Christies of the world.